The floor
Thank
is
you,
yours.
Mr. President, for reading my mind. I certainly do want to make a brief statement. We just had a wonderful debate back and forth. I want to thank, first of all, the gentlelady from Needham for bringing in props today. I am not so well prepared to have a giant calendar behind me, but I think she clearly articulated the issue that we find ourselves in when we talk about our primary election date in 2020. I want to thank the gentleman from Long Meadow, who I've been working with closely for a long time about voter enfranchisement and making sure that we're doing everything we can to maximize voter participation, not only in my district and in his district, but across the Commonwealth. We just moments ago had a compromise amendment that I supported, and I was glad that we voted in favor of unanimously. Mr. President, look, I filed this amendment to move our primary date to September 8th for a simple reason. Because what we saw happen last week in the House and in their version, and then what we baked into our bill in the supplemental, was September 1st, which was the week prior to Labor Day. And I think, you know, we don't have a lot of data back and forth to look at different days, but we know when something doesn't look right. And for me, September 1st, a week before Labor Day, was fraught with all sorts of issues. Number one, we've been told, and I think it was clearly articulated in the debate before, that it's college move-in day in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and in the major schools and universities in the urban areas of Massachusetts. So September 1st isn't an ideal day, we know that. Statutorily, we have to go to September 15th. September 15th doesn't allow us enough time to meet our federal mandate to get the ballots overseas to our veterans and to others that vote outside of the bounds of this country. So we can't do that. So I offered a compromise amendment to say, well, let's do September 8th. Of course, September 8th, as we heard earlier, is not ideal either and has some issues. September 8th being the day after Labor Day. September 8th causes a lot of issues for our clerks who need to set up the machines in each of the voting locations across the Commonwealth. So what do? We're left with 3 dates that aren't great options. So we came together and we've had discussions over the last 24 hours to try and figure out, well, how can we best address this problem? We know on September 1st, not only do we have student move-in day, camps aren't finished. The camps are finished. Oftentimes, the schools aren't back into session yet. I know in my district, half of my schools start each year before Labor Day, half start after Labor Day. We know that many are away that week. We know that leases turn over on that day, on September 8th. We run the risk, if there is a recount or challenges to our elections, that it becomes very, very difficult to certify the election and get the ballots out, as I mentioned earlier. So what do? Well, number one, if we must have our primary on September 1st, which I believe that's the consensus of this body, that if we must have our election on September 1st, then we deal with those disenfranchisement issues, specifically by applying early voting to our primary election. We've done it in other elections. It works great. People seem to enjoy it. It works for people. It increases voter participation in many areas. So I'm proud of this body that came together, saw a problem, and we found a solution. Let's do early voting on September 1st, and I'm glad we just voted on that. Number two, let's work proactively to make sure that we don't go through this exercise year after year. The gentlelady from Needham mentioned earlier, we've been doing this for a decade. Every single time we get into this debate and this discussion. And though they say that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, I certainly wouldn't call this body insane, but my God, these things don't sneak up on us. These are election days that we can plan for, that we can prepare for. So how do we fix that? Well, we come together proactively in a working group, and I want to thank the Senate President, especially and the Chair of Election Laws, the gentleman from Andover, for making that commitment today as we got into a discussion and tried to figure out what we're going to do going forward, making a commitment to ensure that we have a working group in the Senate that works proactively with our Secretary of State, which, by the way, does yeoman's work with these issues on a daily basis. But let's work with the Secretary of State. Let's work with our colleagues in the House. Come together in a working group and figure this out so that we don't have to do this every year. And then finally, I would say, let's use this. Let's use this as a reminder that we must do everything possible to ensure that we are increasing participation at the polls, that we are doing everything that we can to ensure maximum participation in our governmental process, not only on our elections, but in everything that we do. early voting, automatic voter registration, same-day registration, civics education, and making our biennial elections a holiday, a state holiday, which I will file a bill on shortly to do that. Let's do everything we can to make sure that people have access to vote. Remove every single obstacle that we can. That is our obligation. On a basic level, we must be doing that for our constituents. So I want to thank the gentlelady from Newton for offering the further amendment and for spearheading this compromise today. Again, the Senate President and, of course, the Secretary of State who has been weighing in on these issues and working with many of us to try and figure out the right way to do this going forward. So I want to thank you, Mr. President. I did withdraw the amendment, and I'm glad we have a compromise moving forward. Thank you.